So now I'm here to discuss Anthony's overall performance. And first and foremost, I just want to show you the informed consent. This is from my sister, just allowing us to show the videos to you. And then kind of go over the results of each of his assessments. So first, the Berry VMI. I chose the short form for him, but more because we didn't have any more long forms, but I kind of wish there was a long form that I could have done with him, just because he did excel in this. So his raw score was of a 19, and really what I observed with Anthony was that he had a great tripod grasp. He manipulated his paper well to be able to draw what needed to be drawn, and he did get caught up at one point about his inability to be able to erase, and it kind of took him a little bit to accept that, okay, let me move on, even though I know I messed up on that area. So that was kind of interesting to see, and interesting to compare to if somebody had an issue with any sort of emotional regulation. So on the Berry, he did very well. When it came to the Bot, he also did well. Here's an example of his fine motor precision. And so with this, he scored within drawing the crooked path. He had about 2 to 3 errors, so he scored a 5. And then drawing in the curved, he had about 4 to 5 errors, so he got a 4. When it came to connecting the dots, he lifted his pencil each time. And so even though I kept telling him, okay, make sure you don't lift your pencil, he had a hard time understanding that. And so he thought that I didn't want him to lift his pencil from dot to dot, not all the way around. And so I guess it was a little bit hard for him to understand. And so he got about 7 to 8 errors, giving him a score of a 4. When it came to folding paper, this is an area that Anthony did very well on, and he got all 12 points for this. So that was interesting. When it came to jumping jacks, although they weren't super coordinated at this point in time, he was able to spread his hands apart and feet apart simultaneously. So the timing was on, but the coordinated movement wasn't. So watching to see if it was fluid or not. When it came to the didactic kinesis, he was able to do that without a problem. And when it came to the supine or prone extension, rather, he also did very well in that. He knew exactly what to do. The hardest part was getting him to try and hold it for 30 seconds. He would just get bored and say, like, okay, I'm done. So kind of using more encouragement to make him want to hold it for 30 seconds would have definitely been in my favor. So now time for a little bit of activity analysis. I wanted to make a activity that was age appropriate for Anthony, that challenged his thinking and his creativity, and went along with Halloween and that theme. And so I decided to make a witch in a craft activity. And so prior to doing the video, I had him choose between 3 different Halloween activities, and he chose to do the witch plate. And so this required a paper plate, paints, water, paintbrushes, scissors, construction paper, and glue, as well as a table that was an appropriate height for him to work, and enough space on that table for him to be able to have all his materials and still be able to manipulate them in his space. And so just a little bit of a note about Anthony, something that my sister said was okay to share with you, is that he does have a little bit of a learning disability in he has a hard time comprehending and a hard time straying away from the black and white type of thinking. So that higher level thinking takes him a little bit longer. And so I was looking for a activity that didn't provide a lot of direction and could be interpreted, and he would have to make some choices. So for example, in the beginning of the video, I decided to ask him what we should do first, knowing that the witch's face had to be painted and dried. It made most sense to do that step first, and he did understand that. I also asked him questions throughout to kind of prompt his thinking. And so within that, I needed him to be attentive, to use his memory, so he didn't keep going back to that template. Although he could have, he didn't. He knew that we needed hands, we needed a hat, and we needed to paint her face, and we needed to glue it all together. There was some higher level cognition needed to understand where to put things and understand and kind of problem solve the different components. And so he also needed his sensory functions and memory and motor functions, as well as his body systems, just because. In terms of motor skills needed, he needed to be able to align himself, stabilize, coordinate, manipulate, flow and pace his movements. And he did that on multiple occasions. And then in terms of processing, he needed to attend to the task, heed, choose, use, handle any sort of tools, initiate, sequence, so making sure he was doing it in the correct order, gather, organize, and locate. And so I wanted to choose an activity that I didn't have to do a lot of explaining. I could just put the activity down and have him kind of go with it. Socially, he didn't have to engage, but he did. I wanted to really get to his cutting abilities, his tracing abilities, following directions, using two hands together, different graphs. So he used dynamic tripod. He was able to do a scissor grasp. Even rotation was needed to unscrew the top, something that I saw him kind of have trouble with because he would use his entire palm versus just his fingertips. And I also wanted him to look at copying skills. So not just copying like, please look at this and copy this, rather than here's the entire picture. Can you try and copy this? And there's multiple components rather than just a circle or a square or something like that. And so he was able to cut efficiently. He was able to create the hat himself, and it was to scale, which I was very impressed. He made the hat, and it wasn't too big, it wasn't too small. It was pretty much exactly how it should have been, which made it show that he had an understanding of the size and the form that he needed. And in terms of cutting, he was a little bit uncoordinated with manipulating the sheets of paper. So he would come out and try and stabilize with his shoulder at some points to kind of cut like this instead of just manipulating the paper. And there were times that I cued him to maybe cut his paper in half, make it a little bit smaller so that he could manipulate it. And he did, and he was able to follow along with that direction. I wanted to elicit some fine motor, higher level thinking, and I thought I would have to help him a lot more than I actually did. And I actually graded the activity up during this time just because I thought that I would need a lot more templates. So I thought that for the hat, I would have to have him trace a hat. I thought that I would have to help him kind of think through a lot more. And I left a lot of open-ended questions for him just because he was doing so well in the activity. So in terms of two things that I would have done differently during my assessment, it would be to have him during the bot redo the connect the dots, because I felt that I didn't give him enough instruction and I didn't have him attain to me to be able to do that. And then additionally, I would have possibly had him do the activity a little bit differently. But all in all, I thought that Anthony did very well. I thought he was good at what I expected him to do, and I thought that it was very age appropriate for him. I do want to address safety, so I thought that in all areas I made sure that chairs were out of the way. I made sure that he had safety scissors. I made sure that he had the space to work in without putting himself in any harm. However, in the video, I did notice that there was a time that I was outside of the video and he was sitting there with scissors. And even though I was in the same room and I was watching him, from your point of view, it would probably look like I wasn't. So that's one area that I kind of wish that I made it known that I was there with him with those scissors, because safety is something that's very, very important and should be considered for all children. But I really liked the activity. I thought that he did very well, and I really liked doing the assessments in a real life case because it made it a lot more understandable and why we do standardized assessments. So thanks.